December 29th, 2025. The Taiwan Strait. Chinese warships are moving around Taiwan. Fighter aircraft are in the air. Coast Guard vessels are taking positions. Live fire exercises are underway, and this time, the message is different. China is not simply practicing an attack. It is practicing something potentially more dangerous: how to cut Taiwan off. The exercises are real, the blockade is not. But the question behind them is, what if China never needs to invade Taiwan at all? What if Beijing could pressure the island simply by controlling what comes in and what goes out? A full invasion would be one of the most difficult military operations on Earth. Troops would have to cross the Taiwan Strait under fire, while ships, aircraft, missiles, submarines, and coastal defenses tried to stop them. A blockade could present a very different problem. China could attempt to surround Taiwan with naval and air forces, restrict maritime and air traffic, and use military pressure to control access to the island. That possibility is no longer just theoretical. In December 2025, China conducted its largest military exercises around Taiwan at the time, with drills designed to encircle the island and simulate blockades of major ports. And the United States has been studying this possibility too. The Pentagon's 2025 report on China's military and security developments describes a potential joint blockade campaign in which Beijing could cut off vital imports, supported by naval and air forces, while using missile strikes, electronic warfare, and cyber operations. The objective would not necessarily be to conquer Taiwan immediately. It could be to make Taiwan's position increasingly difficult to sustain, until political pressure becomes harder to resist. And that is where Taiwan's geography becomes critical. Taiwan is an island. It has no land border through which supplies can simply arrive. Energy, food, industrial materials, military equipment. Much of what Taiwan needs must cross the sea or arrive by air, and energy is one of the most serious vulnerabilities. Taiwan is heavily dependent on imported energy, while its position in the Western Pacific leaves it exposed to disruptions in maritime supply. A prolonged blockade could therefore create pressure without a single Chinese soldier crossing onto Taiwanese soil. But there is a major problem for Beijing. A blockade would not be risk-free. The moment Chinese forces began stopping or controlling commercial shipping, the crisis would move beyond Taiwan. Ships from other countries could be affected. Insurance markets could react. Global companies could begin rerouting cargo. And the United States would face a difficult question. Does Washington allow China to establish a new reality around Taiwan, or does it attempt to break the blockade? That decision would be extraordinarily dangerous, because breaking a blockade is not simply sending a few ships into the area. American forces would have to operate near Chinese naval, air, missile, and surveillance systems. And China would know that any direct attack on American forces could transform a Taiwan crisis into a direct US-China war. This is where the old logic of sea power becomes relevant. Alfred Thayer Mahan argued that control of the sea can shape the power of nations, and around Taiwan, the sea is not empty space. It is the battlefield. It is the supply route. It is the connection between Taiwan and the outside world. But there is another twist. China itself depends heavily on maritime trade. Research from the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated that about $2.45 trillion of goods passed through the Taiwan Strait in 2022. More than $1 trillion of Chinese imports and exports were part of that flow. So a serious disruption would not simply hurt Taiwan, it could hurt China too. Beijing would therefore face a strategic calculation. How much pressure can it apply before the economic and military costs begin turning against China itself? And how long could Taiwan resist? That question is at the center of Taiwan's current defense planning. In August 2026, Taiwan began its annual Han Kuang military exercises, including scenarios involving communications disruption, civilian resilience, logistics, and possible Chinese aggression. The exercises are designed around a harsh reality. If communication networks fail, if ports are threatened, if supplies are interrupted, Taiwan must still be able to function. And that is exactly why a blockade could become so complicated. It would not necessarily begin with a declaration of war. It could begin with inspections, military exercises, Coast Guard operations, airspace restrictions, cyber attacks, or pressure against ships entering Taiwanese ports. The line between peace and war could become dangerously unclear. That creates another problem: escalation. If a Chinese vessel stops a foreign merchant ship, what happens next? If an American or Allied vessel tries to pass through, does China allow it? If China refuses, does Washington back down? Or does someone decide that the blockade must be broken? One decision could trigger another. And suddenly, a strategy designed to avoid a full invasion could create the very war it was supposed to prevent. That is why the Taiwan question is bigger than the question of whether China can invade. The more difficult question may be whether China can isolate Taiwan without triggering a war with the United States. For Washington, the stakes are enormous. For Beijing, they are enormous too. For Taiwan, they are existential. And for the global economy, the consequences could reach far beyond the Pacific. Because Taiwan is not only strategically positioned, it is also a major center of the global semiconductor industry. A prolonged crisis around the island could disrupt shipping, energy supplies, technology production, financial markets, and supply chains that stretch across the world. So China may not need to storm Taiwan's beaches to create a historic crisis. It could try something slower, something more ambiguous, something designed to create pressure before the world even agrees on what to call it. A blockade, a quarantine, a military exercise that never quite ends. And that may be the most dangerous part. Because an invasion has a clear beginning, a blockade might not. And in the Taiwan Strait, the moment the world realizes that the blockade has become real, the hardest decision may already be waiting for America.
Like, share, and subscribe, and turn on the bell notification for more.